Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Contributor of the Month video for July 2023. I'm very happy to be able to recognize Philip. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to try and read your full name. And you have to tell me if but later you'll correct me. But Phillip-Hope Kọla wọle oju. I'm sorry I made a mess of that for sure. But congratulations, you are the contributor of the month for the incredible work that I always say this, like, even though you've done a lot of work in a particular working group, we're not only recognizing you for that. You're an incredible member with which helps mainly a lot of other contributors come on. So even though the bulk of your work has been located in the Onboarding Wizard working group, just so you know, we value everything that you do as part of the community. So thanks a million for that. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting to know you just a little bit better. I have a few questions ready for you. And I know that at some point you'll also give us a quick demo of the work that you've been able to do. So really looking forward to that. But just to kick things off, who are you and how did you get interested in software development and then eventually in open source?
Yeah, so basically you got the pronunciation of my name correct, at least for someone in Europe.
Yeah.
It's quite very close. It's closer than most people would do, right?
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's excellent. Now for how I got into tech. So majorly it was being around parents who were into tech as well. So my parents were not necessarily into coding, but they were into networking majorly. So it was quite very similar. So I wasn't into networking. I didn't kind of like focus on networking, but I focused on software. And it was kind of like a platform for me to build upon. I started coding quite early, building stuff, just playing around, and of course down to my first professional role. And I've moved across about two companies now, and basically it's been about 6 years, and I've been able to build quite a number of stuff with multiple frameworks and programming languages generally. That's why, of course, the most used in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah.
So
And
that has been,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I've been able to work across multiple industries from real estate to, of course, a startup studio as well that has about, currently I'm in the startup studio that has about um, 2 to 3 software applications under it. And my salary, the HR management platform, Notch, which is a CRM, and of course, a Finratus, which is a financial management platform. It's a for managing business finances, right? So those are 3 applications that we work on daily in the startup company. Yeah.
And what is it about software engineering that you like? What is it like about your job in general that you like the most?
Yeah, so majorly I would say it's the freedom to be creative. Uh, there's a lot that we do that has to do with basically our creativity and our thought process majorly, right? We have to think through things to be able to imagine a solution to a business problem. Basically, the way I look at it is every code is useless unless there's a customer making use of it. So before we just add anything in terms of code, what business problem does it solve? Or what problem does it solve generally? In terms of open source now, we might not be looking at it in terms of business problems, but I look at it in terms of problems, right? So Komiser, for instance, solves the cloud cost problem. It solves the visibility into your resources problems, right? So what problem does this code we're intending to create solve in real sense? So that's how to connect that problem to the code I'm about to write creatively, right? It's the major thing that interests me in terms of software engineering. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. Like the fact that something that you can work on and you can kind of bring to life is actually applicable, makes it really worthwhile.
Yes, so the sense of being creative enough to create something that actually solves business problems.
Yeah. Even though if you look back at the projects that you've worked on, have you been able to kind of like find fulfillment or at least joy in projects that maybe didn't have that much of a clear business proposition. Do you think?
Yeah, well, I would say yeah, definitely there have been cases where I've worked on projects that didn't have like a clear-cut business um application, right? They're just basically just one of those moments where you just build things for the fun. Like those kind of things I do them for fun without any use case as to what problem it solves in real sense. Yeah.
Because that's the cool thing, right? Like in our jobs, of course, we're building things that are applicable and that people get value from, and that businesses can create can base their business models on. But it's also fun to kind of problem solve.
Yeah.
So that's a cool thing. I'm just thinking now. Out of this is the third month in a row that we're doing the contributor of the month. Up until now, the first two contributors that we've recognized were from India. So you are the first African contributor of the month. So we're expanding into different continents. So that's really cool. I'm just thinking, if you were to kind of put on a scale the different African countries and which countries you feel are in a better tech position. I think I read I was trying to find the date of the article because I didn't know if it was that current or not, but what an article that I saw said that Nigeria is like the African Silicon Valley. Would you agree with that? If you look at all of the African countries, is Nigeria a good country to be in as a tech professional?
Yes, generally Nigeria is kind of like ahead of most things in Africa, and tech is one of those things, right? We're way ahead in terms of tech, and there are other countries in Africa as well that are coming up, and they are coming up to speed now, and I'm quite happy about that because it kind of like makes the opportunity go round. But Lagos, Nigeria has been the capital so far in terms of venture capital, in terms of startups, in terms of valuation and revenue generated, and even the market size as well. Yeah. So for a software engineer, Nigeria is kind of like most likely the place to be.
And would you say for is Lagos the only city in Nigeria where there's opportunities, or are there other cities that you would be able to get a good opportunity?
Yeah, so Lagos is almost like the major city, but there are other cities like Ibadan, there is Port Harcourt, there is Abuja as well. There are multiple cities. There are most likely fully remote teams across all states of Nigeria, but majority there's like the Silicon Valley vibe is in Lagos most likely.
Nice, nice, cool. Are you originally from Lagos?
No, I'm not from Lagos. I'm originally from Oyo State, but I'm based in Lagos.
Very nice, very nice. Cool. So moving on, I have another question just before, or actually, I have a couple just before the demo, if you don't mind. I was reading through your Twitter account, and one of the recent tweets that you put out, I found interesting, in which you mentioned that if you were to go back and relearn coding again, you would focus on a statically typed language. And so I'm guessing that if you're going through this thought process, that probably means that you started off with a dynamically typed language. So just the first question would be, if you could, for someone who isn't that familiar with the difference between statically typed and dynamically typed languages, what's the difference, and why would you begin with a statically typed language if you were to start all over again?
Yeah, so the major difference between a statically typed language and a dynamically typed language is most likely the way the compiler reads the code that you've been able to create, right? For statically typed languages, there's the definition of types in the language that makes the code base easy to understand. And then there's the compile time check as well that makes the compiler act as a gatekeeper of what you're kind of building. So that offers developers generally uh, some form of advantage in the sense that the chances that they will create issues, right, and the chances that there will be bugs that will roll into production, they're just a bit limited. most likely the bugs that will roll into productions are those use cases where the requirement was not clearly understood, right? So those are possible use cases for bugs as well in a statically typed language. But for a dynamic um, language, most likely it's at runtime that you would catch those issues that would have been handled by the compiler, right? So it's for me, just looking back now, I would say because I started with Python, right? Just looking back now, I would say I would have preferred probably Golang. Java would have been a maybe, but Golang specifically and TypeScript would have been two things I would have prioritized earlier. Yeah,
Interesting, yeah, because that verbosity at the compiler stage, like every value needs to be assigned, right? So um, if you're getting the getting any errors at the compile stage, you kind of know much sooner. So you have to yeah, like through that verbosity, the developer needs to kind of understand much more, or at least to a kind of like a deeper level, perhaps. And I think uh, your theory there is that the more you understand at the beginning, the better, right? Because maybe the dynamically typed languages, they're kind of abstracting away things that would be interesting for you to fully understand.
exactly.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Cool. Um, so just before we jump into the demo, how do you usually interact with open source projects, and how did you get interested in open source in the first place?
Yeah, so basically the way I got interested into open source was more of, well, um, any project I would most likely want to use, right? I'll take a look at it and just look at it and see how it was built, right? Every open source software is built by some people, developers all around the world, right? And I would want to take a look and just look at the thought process of the developers that built that piece of software. So for me, for Komisar, I was like looking at cloud cost management tools, and Komisar came up. So I dropped a star, right? Because of course the one of the few things that attracted me to Komisar personally was the user interface. It looked good. Open source software are kind of like notorious for being ugly. Yeah, but that's changing nowadays. But typically, open source software, the UI has never been a priority. They just prioritize the functionality and they move on, right? But Komisar looked good, and I think the pace of development was quite fast in terms of the pace at which new features were being added to Komisar was, based on my observation, was quite quick. So those are two things that kind of like attracted me to Komisar. Yeah.
Nice, incredible. Yeah, take it away if you want to show us. I know you've been working on the onboarding wizard feature. So this is a feature that, just to give a little bit of context, the way that pre this feature, the way that you would authenticate when running Komiser locally would be through the config.toml file, where you would add the credentials to your different cloud providers that you would want to integrate. In the backend, we're still using this config.toml file, but now we're adding this onboarding wizard that really kind of helps the user to potentially, there might be users that aren't that technically savvy, that they don't necessarily know how to populate the config file themselves, to be able to just walk them through the whole process, correct?
Yes, basically the onboarding wizard just makes new users getting abroad seamless, basically. Yeah.
Very nice. So so yeah, so take it away. What was the process like?
Yeah, for me it was like picking up the user interface that was designed by the team, right? And kind of like going through the requirements and looking at places where a lot of code could be reused based off what we have on our Comisa as of now, and then what we're trying to create, which is the onboarding wizard as an addition to what we already have. And for me, that was kind of like reading through the legacy code and then looking at how what I'm intending to create fits in, and of course trying to match the UI to pixel perfect was something I prioritize because I think a UI design kind of like offers a template that makes it easy for a developer to just create. And matching any design is kind of like should be a priority for anyone working on the front end generally. Yeah. So for me that was my thought process when I was working on the onboarding wizard generally. Yeah.
Very nice, yeah, and yeah, I can see that you were working closely with the design team to get the wireframes on Figma, and you did an incredible job of, yeah, applying exactly what was there, which is sometimes quite difficult, right, to get pixel perfect, as you say, uh, to match what the front end kind of capabilities are, alongside the different components that the designers put into the wireframes.
Yeah, it's quite difficult. We had a couple of issues with some inputs as well, while we're working on the focus group, right? But of course, I just kept looking at what other approach can we take to try to like get this done. And funny enough, it worked. The approach we took worked for that particular input that was quite very custom built. Yeah.
Nice. So at the moment, we're looking at what it would look like to connect an AWS account, but in that toggle, we can choose different accounts, right?
Definitely. So it's a drop down, and we have all the available providers in AWS, and the icon here is responsive to whatever provider the user has chosen to select. So right now, I think the onboarding wizard is working with AWS, Azure, Civo, Kubernetes, and I think is it OCI? I'm not so sure about that. I think OCI as well. Yeah, but we could just demo the AWS portion now.
Perfect.
So basically, the onboarding wizard just makes it easy to connect any cloud provider that's available to you or that you use that is supported by the Komiser application. And majorly, once you select the provider, you can click on next. And of course, we would want you to label that account. You could label it whatever you like. And there's some form of documentation as well as to um, what type of cloud provider you're working with. And there are multiple options in terms of what credential type you would want to use to connect AWS. You have the credential file, you have the credential keys, environment variables, which of course we default to these keys. So we assume those values will be available. And then of course your I if this is on an IAM instance, let's say an EC2 instance, we expect that the IAM instance row is already attached to that EC2 instance. So for the credential files, of course, you can use the file picker or you can enter a file path depending on whatever that is. And immediately you're done with that, you can as well add a cloud account and it automatically connects and try to sync some data. If that works through, you'll be navigated to a new UI. If it doesn't, you'll most likely get an error, an alert here that kind of shows that just gives you insight as to what the issue with the onboarding wizard is. I mean, with connecting AWS through the onboarding wizard is. Yeah, that's for AWS. I think we could run through Azure as well. For Azure, basically, it's almost the same thing. We only have credential keys. Where it's the tenant ID, the client's ID, the client secret, and the subscription ID. And of course, you connect. And of course, we would offer as much support as possible in terms of whether the connection was successful or there were some issues with connecting. Yeah, so that's it majorly for cloud providers. Would you like me to walk through is this Civo as well?
Yeah, if you want to.
Sure. So for Civo, I think Civo is an API token based provider. So we just expect to put an API token here and would automatically read from the API using the API token you provided, and that way data between Civo and Komiser will be synced automatically as well. Yeah, so for database, I think there's a database option as well. So basically, Komiser supports two database, PostgreSQL and SQLite, and you have the option to either choose either of. but not both. Yeah. So you can select it here based on the UI. We had the option
Oh,
to either
nice.
click on any of the logos on the right, and it's kind of like updates the states, or you could click it here. So for the SQLite, we just expect a file path that you're sure will be existing on the back end. And you could either enter it in here, or you could select a file as well that could be uploaded, and that would be like a starting point for your database. And of course, once you submit, we would of course do a validation, try to see if connection is successful and all that, and then you get the appropriate responses in forms of alerts, either a success or a failure, with some form of context as to what might have been wrong. For Postgres, of course, we expect it's a remote instance or a separate instance, right? And then we expect the server name, database name, username, and password as well. We assume this is where the host and the port will be, so we can connect to the instance, and then using your username and password, and the exact database will be syncing the data that we're reading from your cloud providers into. So that's that for the database as well. And the same process still runs when you connect the database. We give you alerts as to the current state of the project. And I think that should be that. I think there is an additional view that just gives you an insight as to the state of the application. I think it's onboarding slash complete. Just, I'm not certain, but I think that is it. Yeah, it
Oh,
just shows
nice.
you once you're done connecting all your instances, right? It shows you that your data is being synced, and just in a few moments you have access to the full insight and analytics that Komiser has to offer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah. I mean, such an incredible amount of work that I remember looking at the PR, and there's a lot of files here because there's first of all there's a good few files per cloud account, and as we saw in that drop down, there's so many cloud accounts. So it's incredible that you've already been able to create the support for AWS, Azure, Civo, and Kubernetes. Yeah, so incredible work so far. Um, it's been incredible to see that there's been other contributors also interested in helping out, and now that the initial PR has been merged, do you think? Well, first of all, what exactly needs to be finished? The support for those extra cloud providers, right? That would bring the working group to completion.
Yes, so for what needs to be finished, we are trying to make a couple of changes to the backend,
Mm.
right? Basically, the way the backend is structured now, we expect that the database is already available before the instance can start.
Mm.
So we're trying to switch that up and change it, and expose a couple of APIs as well for the cloud providers. So once that is done, we can then integrate those APIs to this particular user interface, and the onboarding wizard should be ready to go to production in Komiser. Yeah. So currently it's under a beta flag that kind of like protects against just use. It defaults to false, so that even if it's merged into the current code base, users don't yet have access to it. But of course, anyone who wants to explore the onboarding wizard beforehand can change it to through, and then the onboarding wizard will run by default.
Ah, okay. Perfect. Yeah, and I understand that even though we still have some roadblocks with these APIs that need to be exposed, and the changes in the back end, that we will be creating some open issues soon, so other contributors can start adding support for those missing cloud providers, right?
Definitely. So we've been able to outline a couple of issues, but we've not created them on GitHub. We hope to move down to that soon, where we've been able to decide like the exact architecture we want the backend to follow. Then, of course, it'll be open for everyone that is interested in contributing to contribute.
So perfect. Yeah, thanks a million for that update. I was just wondering before we go, for people who are starting out, this is something that I ask everyone that I get the chance to, but for open source contributors that are starting out, what tips would you give them that you wish you had maybe when you started contributing to open source projects?
Yes, so I would say majorly ask questions. Most open source communities are quite open, right, in terms of expectations and what is needed. So rather than just going and then getting stuck, I would say ask questions would be something important. There's always a convention, so try to match the convention closely. So I met a couple of convention in Komiser that I tried to match as much as I could, and basically there were a couple of questions back and forth with the PR and a couple of corrections here and there just to make it very detailed, which I did. And then of course the PRs were merged. So I would say ask questions, start with small issues. Before I took up the onboarding wizard, I think I already added a couple of resources on AWS and Azure. I had about 2 or 3 PRs before this onboarding wizard. So pick good first issues just to get yourself at home with the projects, to understand the code base and to like have an insight into how what the workflow is for the particular open source project. So those are 2 things I would say.
Very nice. Well said. Perfect. Thanks a million. Yeah, so happy that you're part of the community. So happy that you've been able to be so successful with this working group. We're yeah, we're looking forward to continue working alongside you because you do bring a lot of value to the community. So thanks again.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure contributing to Commissar. It's been seamless. Contributing has been awesome from my perspective, and I look forward to more contributions and more progress to Commissar. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I'll see you on the Discord server.
All right.
All the best.